3 important composition tips for better photos. Composition is key. And these simple changes and the way you look at composition will significantly improve your photos starting today. My name is Mike Lloyd. I am a professional photographer and educator, and you might notice my demeanor is slightly different in this video because I just recorded this video twice, not realizing that the camera wasn't on, so you couldn't see my face. So third time's a charm. This one's gonna be real good, and I'm stoked that you're here. I've been a professional photographer for 13 years, despite, not realizing I didn't have this camera on. And I've been teaching for 11 of those years. And the reason I got into photography in the first place, why it seemed like a viable career for me, was because I always had a natural eye for composition. I don't know what an aperture was or f-stop or any of that, but I could lay out a really appealing photo. And when I decided I wanted to become a photographer, I already had that down. Now I had to learn how to, control all the other creative elements, depth of field, shutter speed, ISO, all that stuff. So I did have that head start. And because I think that's one of my greatest strengths, I want to share that with you here. So I'm going to give you 3 tips on how to significantly improve your composition. And this applies to all kinds of photography. I'm going to give you images in the boudoir space because that's my world. So the first one is the rule of thirds and the rule of halves. And you probably heard of that before, but I'm going to break down how we use it in boudoir and portraits in general. Number 2 is leading lines and how an image flows. Number 3 is the cheat code I learned from judging PPA print competitions. And it's going to let you know if you did 1 and 2 right. So don't check out early because, again, this is how you're going to verify that you've done the first 2 parts properly. All right, so let's dive into a few of my recent photos. Firstly, this image, if you look at it, it should just look visually pleasing regardless of the context. So if you blur your eyes and look through the image, it should just feel like it's laid out in a way that makes sense. And that is composition. Where do all of the elements go that add to or subtract from what you are trying to create? And I have a very subtractive approach to my images. Very minimalist. I don't want anything in an image that doesn't directly add to the story I'm trying to tell. Whereas other photographers like to add more things, whether it's props, it's textures, it's more lighting elements in a scene. And whatever you do is totally fine. It's entirely an artistic choice. But everything either adds to the story or takes away from it. So keep in mind that you can't just ignore anything in the image. So how to check if this is laid out properly. Here in Photoshop, if you hit Command and the quotation marks or the comma, or control quotes on a PC, you will bring up these grids. Your grids may not look like this. So what you can do, go up to your menu here, Preferences, and you want to go to Guides, Grid, and Slices. For your grid, I like to use the rule of thirds. So 33 1/3. Rule of halves, you can change it there. You can go 12.75-ish if you want to go in 6s. I don't recommend any of those. Just keep it simple. Go 33 1/3 or half, and I'll show you what both of those look like. So what does it mean to use the rule of thirds? We've divided the image into thirds vertically and horizontally. Hashtag composition. So everything in the image will be framed around these vertices. I have not probably used that word since taking a math class in high school. So high five to my algebra teachers for that. Vertice, or a vertex, is a point where 2 lines meet. So these points are the frame of your image. All the important stuff that we focus on is in that space right there. And you use these lines, even none of the vertices, but just the lines themselves will house the important elements. So again, this line right here bisects the weight of the upper body here. We have this line is where her hair falls. That frames this side. This side is where her hip is and her knee is anchored. That anchors this side of the image. And this bottom third here is the center of the sheet. That is the ground of the image. So she's not just floating in space. So you can see a lot of geometry here. But that is composition. Where is everything laid out in relation to everything else in the image, and is it aesthetic? So you can use your thirds to frame your triangles. So we have one triangle here. We have one triangle here. We've got a triangle here. We've got another one. I can do that one better. Yoink. That's so close. That's an isosceles triangle. You can do that one there. We also have just like one main triangle. Okay, let me get serious now. Let's grab another color. The whole thing is also a triangle. So I know that's a big jumbled mess of silly string right there. But you can see how the poses are laid out. Everything that I do, I move through triangles and I position them to fall on these lines. That is using the rule of thirds. So let's look what the rule of halves does for us. If we divide this line down here, in my case, I wanted symmetry in this photo. So we've got this triangle here. Everything is evenly weighted on both sides of the image. And by weight, I mean how bright things are, the color, the contrast, the contextual importance of the elements. So again, yeah, that triangle that we got going on here is split equally around the 4 quadrants. So this is how we use these elements. I'm going to jump back to having the thirds and give you another example of how to use these. So this line right here, this might be where the floor meets the wall and you have somebody positioned there. This line right here might be the horizon, or it could be a fence line. It could be a window frame that somebody is looking through. It could be where their eyeballs are. You know, I generally, if I'm going to have somebody on one side of the frame looking across the other side of the frame, I will put them on a third with their face right here, and they're looking back across. Let me grab a different color. I'll position their face right here, and they're looking back across the frame. That tells one story. If you have them over here looking forward, that tells an entirely different story. And if you have them here looking back, that tells an even different story. That's a lot more crowded and cramped feeling than having them look across the open space, is having them look back across a shorter space. So that is how you frame up your image using the rule of thirds or the rule of halves. You can enable these grid lines in your camera. So you can frame your image this way before you even take it. But if you don't do that and you want to go back and fix it later, you can always crop your image until the elements line up just like that. All right, so that's the rule of thirds and the rule of halves. Let's dive into leading lines. When we look at an image, and I've covered this in other videos, so hopefully this isn't new, the first thing we see is the brightest point, then the highest contrast and the sharpest focus. That's where our eyeballs are trained to look, because that's how we spotted predators in the wild, and that's what kept our species alive for centuries until, you know, we could live in homes and play in Photoshop. But that's still, again, how our brains work. So the first thing you see, the brightest point, which is here. Then our eyes have to go somewhere. It's not random, it's not by chance. The lines in the image direct where our eyeballs go. So she's looking down at her shoulder. So that is where our eyeballs go. We generally follow where somebody's gaze is in the photo. And then from here, you have this line that takes you down, or you have this line that takes you down here. And then you have another line that brings you back up to the facey part, and it's a circle. So We're basically just spiraling through the image. That is how leading lines work. It's generally a subconscious thing. We're not thinking about it when we're looking at an image, but that is how our brains work. So as an artist, you get to create the story that you want to tell and decide where you want them to be looking. Now, if her chin was up a little bit more and her eyes were looking back off the frame here, then we're going to look here first, and then we're going to follow her gaze off the frame. Then that feels awkward, like we're looking out of the frame. But again, it's a storytelling element. You're wondering, what is she looking at over there? And it creates this open loop. We get this mystery of, I want to know what's over there. There's nothing else that signifies what she's checking out. So again, powerful storytelling element. I love doing that in my photos. And then you're going to come back to the image, and then you will circle through, and it'll lead you back to the eyes again. So you will have leading lines. But again, something to consider, if she's looking this direction, we're going to hit this wall with our gaze, and then it's going to feel awkward. And we don't have lines from here that will then lead us back into the circle to loop around again. So that is an uncomfortable feeling image. And again, it's one of those things, you don't consciously know why an image feels uncomfortable when you see it. But if I crop in this way, because her gaze is looking down this way, all this negative space feels fine. If we go the other way though, now she's looking down here, we're hitting this wall. This feels like a big waste of space, and the image feels really heavy over on this side, very cramped over here. Like there's a lot happening in this tight space up against the wall. That is compositionally incorrect. It's like giving me anxiety just thinking about that image. So there you go. That is how to use leading lines to position somebody and the different elements. Now, again, leading lines might not be just the flow of the body. I know you've seen train tracks that go off into the distance and perspective into the horizon. Those train tracks are leading lines. Or if you have a waterfall that flows down into a river, we follow the waterfall, we follow the river. Those are leading lines. So every line that is in an image, whether it is actually a highlight like this, it could be a horizon, it could be a road, it could be somebody's gaze. All of those lines guide our eyeballs through the image subconsciously and tell a story. So consider all of those things when you are putting together your image. How do you know if you've done them right though? This is point number 3, the cheat code I learned from entering PPA print competitions and then judging them. We take an image. I'm gonna turn off my grids there. You're like, cool, that feels like an aesthetically pleasing image. We got triangles. Just to pull the grids back up, we are here on the thirds. Everything is pretty well balanced. This seems right. Am I missing anything? What you do is you flip the image upside down. Because now we lose the context. We don't, obviously we can see that it's somebody posed on a couch, but because the image is upside down, our brains will look at it as lines, shapes, and colors. So unfocus your eyes on the image. Look through your screen, through the image, so it's sort of blurry. And where do your eyeballs go? For me, they go right here. And then the highlights take me along her body where the toes point, the highlight of her arm back up to here, and it repeats. So we're basically going in a circle, spiral like that. That's how I know I've done it properly. If you flip your images over and notice that this pillow is the first place your eyeballs go to, then you need to knock down that pillow a little bit, make it a little bit darker, or brighten the highlights somewhere else. that is a great tip. Eventually, this stuff is going to become second nature, and you're not going to have to manually go through all of these steps. It'll be how you frame an image when you take it, and as soon as you pull it up into whatever editing software you use, you will instinctively go through and darken all these highlight areas that may be distracting. In this image originally, there was a bookshelf here, and a door right here, and a hallway right here. I got rid of all that because there were too many lines, too many things that didn't add to my image. They took away from my main subject right here. There was also like a distracting rug on the ground that I didn't want, so I just made it all black. So that's another way to control leading lines, is to get rid of the lines that you don't want in the frame. Maybe there's pipes in the background, or power cords or tables or something. Any of that stuff will influence your image, and all of it can be removed. So consider every element that goes into your photos, put them on the lines of halves and thirds, consider where the eyeballs are going to be guided around your image, and then flip it upside down to make sure you've done it. I've got a ton of other great videos on this channel about how to take those kind of pictures, different ways to control your compositions, and I recommend watching my image critiques, because you're going to learn a ton about all of this stuff in those critiques also. And if you want to submit your own images to be critiqued in a process kind of like this, or which you'll see in the critique videos, I definitely recommend doing that. You can email me, mike@boudoirguild.com, and I would love to include them in the next round of critiques. If you have any questions about this, drop it in the comments down below. I am happy to help. And if you're like, that's cool, Mike, but how do I just learn this stuff as fast as possible so I can start getting paid to be a photographer? Easy. Head to boudoirguild.com and you can find the courses over there. You are amazing. See you inside.